بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا مولانا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا شفيع المذنبين وقائد الغر المحجلين وصاحب اللواء المحمود والحوض المورود محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So alhamdulillah, we are into our second third of Ramadan and are nearing the last third of Ramadan, described in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, على إنه عتق من النار, emancipation from the hellfire. But before that, we are in the days and nights of maghfirah, which means from our part istighfar, seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إنه ليغان على قلبي فأستغفر الله 100 مرة في اليوم أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Prophet ﷺ said, this ghain, or this cover or distraction comes over my heart, so I seek istighfar, I seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 100 times in a day or more. And of course the Prophet ﷺ is without sin, and he taught us and showed us how to do the istighfar as a matter of his legacy and a matter of practice for us. And if this is true about the Prophet ﷺ, that there is this ghain or this heaviness or distraction, then what about us? What can we say? So we need to seek istighfar not only from the things we think we did wrong, but also the things that we think we did right. That's why after the prayer, the first words that come out of our mouths, we say astaghfirullah, that we did not perform it or didn't have hudur the whole time, or presence of mind and presence of heart throughout the salah. So we seek istighfar from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for that. So inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from the mustaghfirin and the maghfurin, from the ones who seek forgiveness and then the ones who are granted forgiveness by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by His mercy and by His bounty and by His grace, and not because of anything that we deserve, but something that simply is out of mahad al-fadl, or Allah's pure grace that He grants it to us. So we have reached the 17th juz, the 17th night of Ramadan. 17th day of Ramadan also was the day of Badr, Ghazwat Badr Kubra, the Battle of Badr, which was the Faisal, which was the dividing line, dividing point, the watershed moment for Islam to be or not to be. And it was those 313 companions of the Prophet ﷺ, including the Prophet ﷺ, that showed up that day, not only in person, but in terms of their hearts, in terms of their sincerity. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala أيدهم بنصر من عنده وأنزل جنودا لم تروها. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them victory from that which He was obviously capable of doing. And أنزل جنودا لم تروها, and He also sent down His victory and His aid in junud, in the form of soldiers who were angels, لم تروها, that you may not or have been aware of, and they were there. So it's a very mubarak, very blessed night, and we're in a blessed time of Ramadan. So despite what the outward circumstances look like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can say yasluk bina مسلك الأنبياء والأولياء والصالحين والصديقين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, if we look at it this way, that He is taking us down the path of the prophets and down the path of the siddiqeen, of the awliya and of the salihin and of the shuhada, those of us who have passed away in this month because of the pandemic. May Allah have mercy on their souls, and they are inshallah amongst the shuhada, they are amongst the martyrs, and those who persevere through it and come out inshallah on the other end maghfurun, come out forgiven, and come out mansurun, and aided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then inshallah they are amongst the siddiqeen, or at least the salihin of this ummah. And there is not a mihna, there is not a test or a trial, except that it is an opportunity from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that when we come out the other side of it, we will be also from al-muqarramun, those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ennobled, inshallah. So we're going to look at something like that in this session from the 17th juz, Surah Al-Anbiya, or the Prophets. And this is the 21st in terms of the order in the Mus'haf, in the Quran, Surah. And we will begin with ayah number 51. Ayah number 51. And this next few verses are retell the story of Ibrahim, alayhi salam, who is the direct great-great-great-great-grandfather of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the trial and the tribulation that he went through with his own people, with his qawm. يقول الله عز وجل في كتاب العزيز بعد من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولقد آتينا إبراهيم رشده من قبل وكنا به عالمين إذ قال لأبيه وقومه ما هذه التماثيل التي أنتم لها عاكفون قالوا وجدنا آباءنا لها عابدين قال لقد كنتم أنتم وآباؤكم في ضلال مبين قالوا أجئتنا بالحق أم أنت من اللاعبين قال بل ربكم رب السماوات والأرض الذي فطرهن وأنا على ذلكم من الشاهدين صدق الله العظيم. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the translation, long ago we bestowed right judgment on Ibrahim and we knew him well. He said to his father and his people, what are these images to which you are so devoted? They replied, we found our fathers worshipping them. He said, you and your fathers clearly have gone astray. They asked, have you brought us the truth or are you just playing about? He said, listen, your true Lord is the Lord of the heavens and the earth, he who created them, and I am a witness to this. So Ibrahim at this particular time, alayhi salam, they said was quite young. One riwayah that I read said that he was about a teenager, maybe 16 years of age. And so this is before he had any of his children, and I believe before he married his wife Sarah, alayhi salam. And he was a young boy in his qarya, in his village, somewhere in Mesopotamia or modern-day Iraq. And so it begins by saying, the Quran says, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلِ وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. And we gave Ibrahim his rushd, his guidance. You know, Ibn Ajiba said, اللائق به وبأمثاله من قرى الرسل. So at a young age, he was given rushd and guidance and fatana and spiritual insight and so forth, and full guidance even at this young age. And so at this point, where he was living, idol worship or idolatry was the deen, was the religion. There was a corrupt and tyrannical leader at the time, Nimrud or Nimruth, alayhi min Allahi ma yastahiq, who was this corrupt leader. And they had this large hall, as some of the riwayat go, the narrations go, where they kept these idols and kind of lined in rows, and then one of them was made out of gold, who was the biggest one, and that's going to be significant as we see in the verses that follow. And they had a day of zina and jama', a day of zina, in other words, kind of an Eid, so to speak, but an Eid for the idolatry and for the idol worship, where they all come together and sacrifice sacrificial animals to their idols at the altar of their idols. So Ibrahim was a young boy, teenager perhaps at this time, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala atahu rushdahu, gave him his full guidance and the nur of nubuwwah, the light of nubuwwah, وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. And Allah says that we are quite acquainted with Ibrahim alayhi salam and what will be of him and what will become of him, insha'Allah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ. Then he said to his father and his people, مَا هَذِهِ التَّمَاثِيلُ الَّتِي أَنْتُمْ لَهَا عَاكِفُونَ. There is some discussion about who's the father here, what father of Ibrahim. Some of the books of theology, if you read them, especially in the Ash'ari school, They maintained that the sulala, the the direct line of the Prophet ﷺ going all the way back to Adam alayhi salam, was full of and only muwahidun, and no fornicators either. And because the Prophet ﷺ said about himself, خرجت من نكاح ولم أخرج من سفاح, that I came from nikah, I came from people who were married and wedded, and that's my line. And lam akhruj min sifah, and they extrapolated from this that also, how can it be that one of the ancestors of the Prophet ﷺ was involved in or actively involved in idolatry? So there is some khilaf and discussion about this, and they state that this person who we called Ya Abi, or father, was actually the uncle of Ibrahim. That's one interpretation, that it was the uncle. And they use the other verse in the are you taking idols as your gods? And they say there's a dalil in this, because why would the Quran need to say him by his name? It would have sufficed to say with قال Ibrahim li abihi. Then it says li abihi azara, so as if qualifying, well, which father is this? And that even in the Quran, it refers to sometimes uncles and fathers as both being like fathers, like in the sulala of Ibrahim himself, Ishaq, and then Yaqub, and then Yusuf, and then Yusuf, his father was like Ismail was referred to him as his father in the verse, even though Ismail is not in the direct line of Yusuf. He is from the grandson of Ishaq, but he is like a father. He's put in with the aba. So aba, fathers altogether. So this may be a convincing argument, not a very convincing argument. And there are others, if you read the standard Tafseer, like Qurtubi and Tabari and so forth, they don't really make any mention of that. And they just go along that this was the father of Ibrahim. Whatever the case may be, it doesn't take anything away from the nubuwah of our Prophet ﷺ. Wallahu a'lam. So anyway, so he says to his father or his uncle or someone who was from, amongst his male relatives from the paternal side, وقومه, and his people, ما هذه التماثيل التي أنتم لها عاكفون. What are these idols? تماثيل مثل. The mithil means to be a likeness of, technically. So they fashioned idols, a likeness of, usually with some kind of combination of some animal form and some human form. And then this would be that which they take to worship. So as you've seen, like in some of the Quranic relics, and you see like the head of a lion or the body of a man, or opposite, the body of a person, and the body of a lion, head of a man, and so forth. So this type of tamathil, he said, what are these tamathil? What are these idols that you have taken? التي أنتم لها عاكفون, right? عاكفون, that you have been persistently, you're at their altar all the time and you take them as gods. And then he said to them, or they said to him, قالوا وجدنا آباءنا لها عابدين. And this has been the refrain often, even with the Quraysh. This was the same refrain that they said to the Prophet ﷺ, we have taken these idols because we have found our forefathers doing the same. And this is what they said here. قالوا وجدنا آباءنا لها عابدين. We have found our forefathers worshipping them. And then Ibrahim says emphatically, لقد كنتم أنتم وآباؤكم في ضلال مبين. You and your forefathers are in clear misguidance. These are idols, they have no power. Then they say to Ibrahim, قالوا وجئتنا بالحق أم أنت من اللاعبين. He's like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? This is the deen of our forefathers. How can you say that? Are you playing around? Are you saying the truth? He said, قال بل ربكم رب السماوات والأرض. He said, your Lord, the true Lord, is the Lord of the heavens and the earth. الذي فطرهن, right? The one who فطرهن, gave them their creation and put them in it to begin with, not these false idols you have here. وأنا على ذلكم من الشاهدين, and I am witness to all of this. Now it's said at this point, before the next verse in the story, that they listened to him and then they dispersed and were going to get ready to worship their idols. And Ibrahim was asked if he's interested in coming. He said, no, أنا سقيم. Then another verse in the Quran, قال إني سقيم فتولوا عنهم مصبحين. Right, so they turned away from him. The next morning they went out to do their day of zina. But He said, Inni saqim, in the sense that I have a sick, yani, and not able to withstand this idolatry that you're seeing. So he was not a participant, but they went home to get ready, and Ibrahim remained in the area of the so-called temple where the idols were. And then he pronounced these words, وَتَاللَّهِ لَأَكِيدَنَّ أَصْنَامَكُمْ بَعْدَ أَن تُوَلُّوا مُدْبِرِينَ فَجَعَلَهُمْ جُذَاذًا إِلَّا كَبِيرًا لَهُمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ يَرْجِعُونَ. So they had walked away, and then he said, by God, I shall certainly outwit your idols as soon as you have turned your backs. And everyone had walked away, they said, except for one person who overheard Ibrahim say this to himself. So he didn't say it fil mala', he didn't say it in front of everybody, but one person overheard it. And so Ibrahim remained, he was there by himself, and then he said, فَجَعَلَهُمْ then جُدَاذًا إِلَّا كَبِيرًا لَهُمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ يَرْجِعُونَ. Then he broke them all into pieces, but left the biggest one for them to return to. And it said that the biggest one had like a axe-like stone thing in its hand, also made of stone, and he took that piece, broke it apart from the idol, or he had an axe himself and destroyed all the other idols, and then he tied the axe around the neck of the biggest idol, which he had left alone, obviously to send a message to them, which we'll see what that message was after they came and saw this. So they came and they said, قَالُوا مَنْ فَعَلَ هَذَا بِآلِهَتِنَا إِنَّهُ لَمِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. They said, who has done this to our gods? How wicked he must be. And even just مقول القول, looking at what they said, مَنْ فَعَلَ هَذَا بِآلِهَتِنَا. Who has done this to our gods? What a ridiculous even proclamation. What do you mean, who has done this to? What type of gods are they if someone can do something to them? So this was the whole point of Ibrahim alayhi salam, to show them. إِنَّهُ لَمِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. Right? They said, oh, he's from the people who have done a great disservice, have done a great wrong. This is what they said about Ibrahim alayhi salam. قَالُوا سَمِعْنَا فَتًى يَذْكُرُهُمْ يُقَالُ لَهُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ. This is the man who overheard. Right? That's what he has said. We heard a youth called Ibrahim talking about them. So he had overheard what Ibrahim had said as everyone was leaving and no one else had heard him. قالوا فأتوا به على أعين الناس لعلهم يشهدون. They said, bring him before us, for the people, so that we may witness his trial, because basically that's what it was, a type of trial. They wanted to see what the truth was. Then they said to him, قالوا أنت فعلت هذا بآلهتنا يا إبراهيم قال بل فعله كبيرهم هذا فاسألوهم إن كانوا ينطقون. They asked, was it you, Ibrahim, who did this to our gods? He said, no, it was done by the biggest of them, this one, and he pointed to the one that had the axe wrapped around his neck. Ask them if they can talk, if they can speak. Why don't you ask them? فرجعوا إلى أنفسهم فقالوا إنكم أنتم الظالمون. So they went back to themselves. They turned to one another saying, it is you who are in the wrong. So they realized initially, he's right. What type of religion is this? What type of worship is this? We can't even, the gods cannot even defend themselves, and then we're left to speak to the one who remains. He can't answer us either. So, but it wasn't long before they lapsed, as the next verse goes. فرجعوا إلى أنفسهم فقالوا إنكم أنتم الظالمون ثم نكسوا على رؤوسهم لقد علمت ما هؤلاء ينطقون. But then they lapsed again and said, you know very well these gods cannot speak. Right? We don't have that expectation. Then Ibrahim said, قال أفتعبدون من دون الله ما لا ينفعكم شيئا ولا يضركم أف لكم ولما تعبدون من دون الله أفلا تعقلون. So, but then they lapsed again and said, you know very well these gods cannot speak. Ibrahim replied, how can you worship what can neither benefit nor harm you instead of God, instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? أف لكم. هذه كلمة أف, I believe it's only 2 times in the Quran, this verse, and also in the verse in Surah Al-Isra, when it says وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا, about one's parents. Don't say to them uff and don't revile them. So uff is, they said, is a word that means disgust or disillusionment or distaste, I would say, for something that you see. So it's kind of it reflects an emotion. Uffin lakum. So, what is this? Shame on you, sort of, or this. How is this? Shame on you and the things you worship instead of God. Have you no sense? Uffin lakum walima ta'budun. So shame on you and to the thing that you worship. Min dunillah afala taqilun. Do you not have aql? Do you not have intellect? Do you not see the folly of your way? And then they replied back after all of this, and they didn't actually reply, and they realized there's nothing that they could say. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the hujjah, gave him the clear kind of burhan, demonstrative proof of the folly of worshipping these idols. And as is the case with most, when you have no answer to say and when you are not able to bring forth a response, then it usually resorts to aggression and violence. And unfortunately, or fortunately, this is what happened with Ibrahim alayhi salam. So then they said, قالوا حرقوه وانصروا آلهتكم إن كنتم فاعلين. They said, burn him and avenge your gods if you're going to do the right thing. So in the Tafseer, it says that they chose fire because it is the most agonizing way to die, to be burned alive. And that's why they chose it. We also know about the Ashab Najran, Ashab al-Ukhdud, who also were thrown in the pits of fire as a punishment. And also Pharaoh resorted to that by using boiling cauldrons of oil and water and throwing people in there. So it's a very evil and despicable, miserable way to make somebody die. But that's what they chose for Ibrahim. They wanted the worst thing. And it says in the Tafsir that they spent 40 days collecting firewood from the nearby forest and building this fire to a degree of heat so hot that when birds flew over, they would be instantly charred and fall dead. That's how hot this fire was, and they maintained it and kept it very hot. And the assumption is Ibrahim was held captive until the fire was ready to at its apex, at its highest peak. And then they were also a little bit dumbfounded because we can't even walk near to it without getting burned. How are we supposed to get him into the fire? And it's said that Iblis, one of the riwayat, Iblis came in the form of a man, and he has done this before. He did this hundreds or 1,000 years later with the Prophet ﷺ, when he told the Quraysh about splitting the blood amongst the tribes. So when they wanted to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ, and they didn't know how to do it exactly without getting away with it, so he told them if each strong young man from Quraysh were to split, each one of them take a hand in doing it, then Banu Hashim would not be able to fight all of them at once. So Iblis also did his machinations here, and they said they didn't know how to get him into the fire pit. And so they said Iblis, Satan, taught them how to build a manjaniq. And a manjaniq is a catapult, which was a method of warfare which was probably for that time quite revolutionary to be used at that particular time. And so they fashioned this manjaniq, this catapult, which was some distance away from the fire pit itself, and then they put him in that manjaniq, and they had him tied. They tied his wrists and his ankles, and he was completely, unable to get out of that. And when the angels saw this, it's also said that they pleaded to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, said, Ya Allah, Ibrahim is the only one on the face of the earth who's muwahid, who is worshipping you. And that's one of the interpretations. The Quran says that Ibrahim kana ummah, he was an ummah by himself. In other words, at that particular time there was no muwahideen. There weren't any people who believed in the oneness of God. So the angels pleaded with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, Ya Allah, this is the only wahid on the face of the earth. If something happens to him, what will be left? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to them, if you want to go and offer your help to him, then you can. It's up to you. So they launched him catapulted him into the fire pit. And it said as he was in midair, the angel Jibril alayhi salam, came to him and said to him, Alaka haja. He said, is there anything we can do for you? And Ibrahim alayhi salam responded, Amma mink fala. From you, I don't need anything. And then he said, well, what about asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He said, Hasbu ilmullahi bihali an su'ali. Hasbu ilmullahi bihali an su'ali. He said, it's enough that Allah knows my situation, that I don't need to ask. And perhaps this is referring back to the verse in the beginning that we read. وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. Right? وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. We gave Ibrahim the rushd, the full guidance, the hidayah. وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. And we are well acquainted with him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, I'm well acquainted with Ibrahim. And Ibn Ata al-Secondary says in one of the hikam, رُبَّمَا ضَلَّهُمُ الْأَدَبْ عَلَى تَرْكِ السُّؤَالِ تَرْكِ الطَّلَبِ. Perhaps the adab, sometimes the etiquette, especially of the big awliya and clearly some of the prophets, that they don't ask and they say, حَسْبِ اللَّهِ بِحَالِ عَنْ سُؤَالِ. That it's enough that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows of my situation and then He'll take care of me. So that's a way of having a uns billah, having this intimate relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also asking Him, because we find other prophets asking Him as well, like Musa alayhi salam asked, وَاجْعَلْ لِي وَزِيرًا مِنْ أَهْلِي. He said, أَجْعَلْ لِي وَزِيرًا مِنْ أَهْلِي. Allah, give me a wazir, give me someone to help me from my ahl, from my family. And so He gave him Harun. أشدد به أزري وأشركه في أمري كي نسبحك كثيرا ونذكرك كثيرا إنك كنت بنا بصيرا. So Harun alayhi salam and Musa alayhi salam asked. So it depends upon the particular circumstance. And they said, for us, for people who are followers of prophets and so on, alayhi salam, inshallah, that we also can. Sometimes the maqam will be the maqam of asking, and sometimes the maqam will be the maqam of al-iktifa. بِعِلْمِ اللَّهِ بِالْحَالِ عَنِ السُّؤَالِ. Enough to suffice one that Allah knows your situation. So in this situation, this is what Ibrahim said. And then the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يقول قالوا حرقوه وانصروا آلهتكم إن كنتم فاعلين قلنا يا نار كوني بردا وسلاما على إبراهيم وأرادوا به كيدا فجعلناهم الأخسرين. They said, burn him and avenge your gods if you're going to do the right thing. But we said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya nar, O fire, be cool, bardan wa salaman, and safe for Ibrahim. أَرَادُوا بِهِ كَيْدًا وَجَعَلْنَاهُمُ الْأَخْسَرِينَ. They planned to harm him, but we made them suffer the greatest loss. So it said that Ibrahim, then when he was cast into the fire pit, and he was in it, fire was all around him, raging around him. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it cool and safe. They said if Allah only made it cool, then that also would have been harmful to Ibrahim, because the coolness of Allah can be made harmful. But He said make it cool and safe for Ibrahim. So it was cool and safe. And it said that Ibrahim alayhi salam, they left him there for days, if not weeks, in this fire pit. And the Tafseer mentions that Nimrud, this corrupt tyrannical king, he saw Ibrahim, then he saw some man kind of with him or sitting next to him. And he said to Ibrahim, can you walk out of this fire pit if you wanted to? He said, of course I can. He said, then go ahead. And so then he walked out of the fire pit. And he said, who is that man with you? He said, this is the angel of the dhil. This is the angel of the shade. He came to shade me. And Ibrahim, at that point, they had actually cast him into the fire, and he didn't have any clothes. He was naked. And when he comes out of the fire, he had a qamis. He had a shirt, or a thawb on. And this, they said, is the same qamis that was inherited later by his son Ishaq, and then passed on to Yaqub. And Yaqub, when he had the qamis and he put it, and was blind from sadness from losing his son Yusuf, فَارْتَدَّ بَصِيرًا. So that qamis was the qamis of Ibrahim that they said came from paradise itself, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala covered his awrah and clothed him while he was in the fire. Wallahu a'lam bis-sawab. That's what the tafsir says, and it doesn't say explicitly in the Quran, but these type of things, some of ashab al-siyar, the people who record the seerah, so forth, include them in the riwayat. So yultamas means we can take it and accept it as long as it's kind of not contradicting and conforming to the general meaning of the verses. وَأَرَادُوا بِهِ كَيْدًا فَجَعَلْنَاهُمُ الْأَخْسَرِينَ. And they were the one who were the great losers. And it said after that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent this sort of plague of mosquitoes, both to Nimrud and all of the people of that qawm. And they died very painful and horrible deaths. Even Nimrud said that the mosquito got into his brain and he went mad and died from that afterward. فَجَعَلْنَاهُمُ الْأَخْسَرِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala انتقم لنبيه. He's the one who is the muntaqim. He sought vengeance for his prophet alayhi salam, and then that was their end. So in the ishara here are kind of some of the meanings we can derive for our own purposes. Ibn Ajiba, he said, this type of mihna, look at this great test that Ibrahim alayhi salam went through. And it was literally sabr sa'a, right? It was patience for a moment or a time, but it was really weeks and perhaps months in the case of Ibrahim. But his faith, his taqwa, his rushd, his hidayah, he was an ummah by himself because he was facing a whole ummah. He didn't have any followers at that time. No one believed him. No one thought he was right. Everyone was in the wrong. And so since he had no khalil, he had no friends, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala became his khalil. That's why he's Khalilullah, right? He is the close friend of Allah because Allah replaced al-khullah that he should have had from his people and from his qawm and from the village and the city dwellers. None of them followed him, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the khulla al-ilahiyya. He gave him the divine khulla, or the divine friendship, the friendship of God Azza wa Jal subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the mihna, the test, the trial, the tribulation, when it comes about, then we do our best to be patient in it. We notice that Ibrahim didn't ask Allah to lift the tribulation, and we said that's a maqam. Some of the ulama and the awliya say that sometimes don't be so hasty for the tribulation to go away. You ask Allah to give you strength and patience and forbearance in it, because maybe there's a lesson that you are going to learn within it. And so sometimes the adab, the etiquette will be to seek forbearance and patience. And sometimes you can also ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to lift it. We find other prophets also, for example, Yunus in the belly of the whale. He said, La ilaha subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin. Right? And then Allah said, Fastajabna lahu. He didn't actually ask Allah, he just stated his hal. Right? He said, La ilaha illa ant, no God except you, subhanak, glory to you. Inni kuntu min al-zalimin. I am the one who have done wrong. I left 100,000 people and I gave up on them and I left and I got into the boat. And then I found myself, the loser of the short straw, so to speak, when the waves were taking the boat, and then they put me off the plank, as it were, and I fell into the belly of the whale. And then فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْغَمِّ. And then we saved him from the gham, from that very difficult situation, and then he was saved and went back to his people, alayhi salam. So all of these are different ahwal, different maqamat. There's the maqam al-su'al, yes, you can ask, talab, it's in one. And Prophet ﷺ definitely, he supplicated and he asked as a matter of ibadah, but at the same time, مَا تَفْوِيدِ الْإِجَابَةِ إِلَى اللَّهِ, leaving the answer up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we do ask, we do seek for lifting of trial and tribulation. Let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put complete faith and confidence it will be lifted in the time that He designates, and in the manner that He designates, and in the way that He designates. So you're asking Him really as a matter of ubudiyyah, ithhar al-ubudiyyah, which means to actualize your servitude towards God by asking only Him and not asking anybody else, by bringing the shakwa, right, by bringing the pain that you're feeling to Allah and not counting upon people to lift that pain or tribulation from you. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of as-sabirin when the mihna comes, if and when the bala, the trial and tribulation comes, and to give us fortitude and patience, inshaAllah. Our sister Sidra has some questions. I don't know the answer to all of them. There is some riwayah that Maryam will be the wife of the Prophet ﷺ in the next life, Wallahu A'lam. And in relation to Yahya and Isa, they did support one another. But as we know, Yahya alayhi salam was killed by his people. And so, whereas that was not the case with Isa alayhi salam, he was وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. They did not crucify him, nor did they kill him, but he was raised to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know, as we mentioned in the session the other day, that the Prophet ﷺ encountered both of them in the same level of heaven, Yahya and Isa alayhim as-salam. والله تعالى أعلى وأعلم بالصواب والحمد لله رب العالمين. بارك الله فيكم، جزاكم الله خيرا، بارك الله في القرآن العظيم، وارزقنا تلاوته آناء الليل وأطراف النهار لعله يرضى عنا وعن أهلنا وعن المسلمين وعن هذه الأمة، وأن يفرج عن هذه الأمة غمها وهمومها، وأن يعيدنا إلى الدين ردا جميلا، وأن يغفر لنا خطايانا، وأن يلهمنا الرشد والصواب، وأن يبارك لنا فيما بقي من هذا الشهر الكريم، ويجعل وسطه مغفرة وآخره عتقا من النار، ويرزقنا ليلة القدر. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to stand in prayer on Laylat al-Qadr, Isabat Laylat al-Qadr, and also to have the great bounty of this month. Barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullahu khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.